My name is Azeem. It's fantastic to be in Istanbul. Let me see if the clicker works. Okay, so who am I and why on earth am I here? I'm the founder of a company called Peer Index. I'll tell you a little bit about Peer Index in a minute or two. I've got about 20 years in the internet industry, launching internet services for The Guardian back in '95 and The Economist and the BBC. And I've worked with more than 20 startups. One was called PowerSet, was acquired by Microsoft, and many of the search results in Bing now use PowerSet's technology, and involved in a company called Evi, which was acquired by Amazon to help them build out their Siri competitor. So one of my real interests is in the application of machine learning and big data, natural language processing and so on to build better classes of intelligence. I'm at Azeem on Twitter, and I'm mircasting this. So that's about me, and then the question is, why am I here? Because yesterday I was in Austin at South by Southwest, which is a fantastic conference, but somebody incredibly persuasive suggested I should come to Istanbul. That's Arda, so thank you, Arda, for the invitation. Turkey is booming, complex story, of course, but it is a booming market. It's great to be here, and I love Istanbul. And the final clincher for me is the new Soho House has just opened this week, and Nick Jones, who runs Soho House, always does a brilliant job with his restaurants and clubs. So it's fantastic to be here in the opening week, where I'll go later this evening. So I'm going to talk about social intelligence, what it is, why it matters, examples of it in use for marketers, and what's going to happen next. I didn't check whether the format was Q&A. So if you do have a question you want to ask, just tweet me via the Meerkat stream, and I can pick it up on here and I'll scan through. And if something comes up that is super relevant immediately, I will take it live and just stick to time. So let's just talk about the story. Peer Index was a startup, a technology startup, which was building predictive and prescriptive analytics on social media, something that we set up in 2009. We pioneered the prediction around people behavior, personal attributes on social. So we would be able to look at a social stream from LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook and start to predict things. Traditional marketing attributes like your gender, more advanced attributes like your propensity to spend, and even more advanced attributes like whether you were influential in a given subject or topic or affinity. We were fortunate to be recognized as a real technology leader. We won the Grand Prix award at the Europas, which are the main tech awards for startups in Europe. And today we index about 315 million users, and we identify their brand affinities, their content preferences, and other attributes in near real time. To give you a flavor, we have nearly 3 million, or 2,954,658 users indexed in Turkey as of about 10:45 this morning. And in December 2014, we were acquired by a company called Brandwatch, which is a leading social intelligence platform. It's quite interesting for me to take my baby that I had started and sell it to somebody. The reason we did it was what we saw that Brandwatch had, and we've got customers in Turkey. I don't know how many there are, if there are any in the room. It's a fantastic company, more than 1,000 clients in 15 markets, collecting and data in 27 languages, including Turkish. It's great as a business, been growing at 100% year on year for the last 6 years. But the thing that really persuaded me as an entrepreneur that this is a great place for my company was that we had the highest rated product in our market in a couple of third-party services and 97% customer satisfaction. So that tells you a company is doing something right. It tells you some company is going to do well. And as an entrepreneur who has a fourth child in the form of their startup, you want to send it to a great university like Brandwatch. So what do we do within Brandwatch Peer Index? On the one hand, we are crawling a ton of content, whether it's forums in which products get discussed, or the social media. We have full access to all of Twitter. We crawl an enormous amount of data, and we have it available historically, and we have it available to be queried for marketers to start to understand their customers and their target audiences better. And within our analysis, we do topic and sentiment analysis, and I'll touch on why that's interesting for marketers later. And of course, we now have the award-winning people data that Peer Index brought in. But our main focus now is to help marketers make much better strategic decisions based on what is going on the social web. So what is social intelligence? A quote from McKinsey and Company. You can tell that something is important if McKinsey spends time talking about it, because McKinsey only ever really works for the chairman, the board of directors, or the chief executives of the largest firms in the world. But this is from a research report a couple of years ago where they said that, that today there are lots of people on social media who have knowledge and preference and affinities around particular products. And if you use the right kind of analytics, a company can develop a social intelligence that is forward-looking, that is global, and can play out in real time. And one of the things that McKinsey concluded was that social intelligence was an essential tool for boards looking to make the best possible decisions. So that's quite a strong claim for social intelligence. That's McKinsey's view. One of the ways I look at this is to compare social intelligence to other types of intelligence that, that marketers use. What's nice about social is that it's global. 3 million users in Turkey, users in the US, users in China, users in Togo. It's real time. It's very externally oriented because the intelligence that you gather isn't coming through the filtered lens of your market research. It's externally oriented because nearly everything you hear is from people outside of the company. And interestingly, it's observed. So it is really based on people's real actions, their real retweet of an Arsenal football score, or their real complaint at an airline for being late. It's not prompted by market research. And it really complements the other forms of intelligence. I've written a few there. One of them is not intelligence. Your boss's prejudices is not a type of intelligence. But market research, CRM, sales data is. And what's really interesting about it is that it sits in the middle of being external and global, real time, and being actual behavior. Market research, traditional research that we do is fantastic and useful and isn't going away, but it's not based on actual behaviors. It is also based on the questions that you frame when you put out a survey. So there's some real complementarity between what you can do with social intelligence and what you already do. It's working. Try that again. Aha. And what we've seen over the last 5 years is an increasing value of social intelligence. The old world, which is probably the world that most of us are still in, is that data on social networks like Facebook and Twitter was used to improve performance on those social platforms. So it was used to increase your followers, increase the number of clicks that your content got. Now that is all very tactical, that is very low value. It's a little bit like that famous snake from Greek literature which eats itself, the Ouroboros. So you were using social data to improve your performance on social, which gave you different social data. Not that useful. But what's starting to happen in today's new world, as we live in a world where there are 1.4 billion people on Facebook and 300 million on Twitter, and every digital native is natively social, is that you can use this analysis when you use it in the correct way with the right kind of algorithms to give you data that allows you to make decisions about your marketing spend, to make your decisions about pricing, about customer service problems, even about which new markets you should enter. So that is a transformation from low-level tactical information that helps a social media team to strategic high-level information that helps the core of your business. Are we reducing our customer acquisition cost? Are we reaching the new segments we want to reach? Are we increasing our profit margins? Are we producing the right products? And that brings us to the heart and the nature of intelligence. So this is from Gartner, which is a consultancy, and they look at 4 types of intelligence. And on the y-axis, they've plotted value, and on the x-axis, they've plotted difficulty. And by difficulty, they mean difficulty in technology, difficulty in gathering the data, and difficulty in persuading your boss that this is actually meaningful. The lowest class of data is this descriptive analytics. This is what happened yesterday. So that's the rear view mirror of the car, which is really helpful for knowing what you just saw, not so helpful in helping you avoid the child crossing the road. The second tier is diagnostic analysis, which is why did it happen? So that is basically saying, well, the reason our sales were bad last week is because our flagship store had a lot of staff who were sick. It's still diagnostic, it's retrospective. We're now moving up, courtesy of better data and better technology, to predictive analytics. So what is going to happen? What will happen in the next 3 months and in the next 6 months? And do we have a good basis for making those predictions? And the final level is prescriptive analytics, which is talking about how can we actually make it happen. So coming out with a prescription that says, based on the data that we see over here, we think you, Mr. Company, need to take this action in this way by this time to get this response. And what's been exciting in the analytics space for me as somebody who founded a business that was up at the top 2 of those areas, predictive and prescriptive, really from its start, is that the market has moved and people are now willing to believe that prescriptive analytics are possible and that will give them a strategic advantage relative to their competition. So I'll just jump into some examples, but I need to grab some water. Give me a second. And I'll quickly use this opportunity to check whether we're getting hundreds of questions on Twitter. What's the prediction? I think not many. Let's try. A fantastically good-looking guy called Azhar Kutsal has been retweeting this. So, okay, so there is some action going on there. Thank you, Azhar. So 3 examples I'm going to talk about. One is in financial services, which is an example of a company that used social as an external sensing network to give them real-time, nuanced feedback as to what was happening in their business faster than their internal control systems and monitoring systems. The second is a retail example where we had a retailer that needed to make rapid changes to its stores as it went through a process of refreshing its stores for a more digitally savvy audience. And the final is another segment where social data was used to support a digital transformation. So Sparkassen is a huge German financial institution. I guess everybody here is familiar with it. Nearly 250,000 employees, which just blows my mind. It's enormous. And more than 15,000 branches across Germany. And Sparkassen was working with Brandwatch and had used Brandwatch to monitor customer sentiment about the bank throughout Germany. And one of the things that we identified for them was that there were a number of people complaining about a broken ATM. So I have a picture of the ATM machine there. That's not the one that was broken. That's the one that Google Images found for me. But imagine, similar ATM broken, surrounded by angry Germans who had turned to Twitter to complain about it. And using some of our geolocalization technology, we were able to identify exactly which branch had the broken ATM. Now, what then happened was the social media team alerted the branch and told them your ATM's broken, and they were able to send technicians out to fix that there and then. Now here's the interesting thing, the branch manager was sitting there in the branch, 15 feet, 5 meters away from the ATM, but did not know it was broken. And the bank's own monitoring systems hadn't at that point picked up that the ATM machine was broken. And yet they've got 15,000 branches, so every day this could be happening. And every day they could be annoying customers and reducing customer satisfaction and see their NPS, Net Promoter Score, go lower. And yet they were able to take something as simple and trivial as a tweet and turn that into a very specific action that had immediate positive outcomes for the business. Now, you can respond to that by building better monitoring systems, right? You could go and say, let's monitor our ATMs more frequently, more quickly, so we figure out if they're broken. The trouble is that you can't pick up every contingency. So this being Germany, there could have been other things wrong. You could have had somebody who had had too much beer slumped in front of the ATM. The ATM is working perfectly, technically working, but there's a drunk man lying on the pavement in front of it. There's no real way for an automated system to pick that up. But in social, somebody can go off and say, there's a drunk man outside the Sparkassen ATM machine in Berlin. That really annoys me. And you'd be able to pick that up and respond to it. So although it's a small example, it is a great example of a prescriptive analytic that allows you to take action immediately. And we've got a number of financial services companies now increasingly start to do that. And what they can start to do as well as they think about digital transformation is start to better understand those native customers, the ones who don't go into branches anymore, but who do live on their cell phones and their smartphones. You know, the younger group who will turn immediately to Twitter or to social to make a complaint. They won't even think about calling the number now. They will just tweet and say, I'm having a horrible experience with X or Y. So that's one example. The second example that I have is with a retailer called Argos in the UK. So this is a reasonably sized retailer. It's got 50,000 employees, 700 branches, 4 billion in sales every year, which is about 16 billion Turkish lira. And they're a really interesting proposition because they're a catalog retailer, but they have physical stores. So what you do is you walk into the store, there's a catalog, you find the product that you want, you fill out the order form, you give it to a customer service rep, and the rep then looks it up in inventory, and they get it from the stock room at the back and they give it to you. So it's quite an interesting catalog model. And Argos had a bunch of very, very interesting strategic advantages. One thing, 90% of the UK population lives within 5 or 6 miles of an Argos store. So they have fantastic footprint globally. They were already set up for catalog shopping, which is essentially what e-commerce is about. But as the retail behavior, consumer behavior started to shift over the last 15 years to experiential shopping in some of our big shopping malls and to online shopping and the convenience of Amazon in particular, you know, Argos found itself in a position where it needed to think about transformation. They have all these physical assets, which are the stores. So how do you turn them into an advantage? And the route they took was, let's refresh our stores to appeal to a more digital audience. This is strange, right? It's a more digital audience, but you're having a physical presence. And what they did was they transformed these stores that weren't very nice. They weren't great experiences compared to the experiences, say, that you get into an Apple store, into something that looks a lot more like an Apple store. In fact, those are iPads that they have mounted. And it was a significant investment in changing their internal processes and changing their physical brand representation and their customer interface to these types of stores. And crucially, they had taken out the physical printed catalogs. Now, every person in Britain above the age of about 25 will remember the Argos catalog. It was about 800 pages, and it's where we always used to get our toys from, and our gardening equipment and our kettles. So this was a big shift for them, and the way that Brandwatch helped them was to set up social tracking around opinions to do with the stores, filtered by the kind of demographics that matter to Argos's market planners. Those things were gender and age, but also location. And so they were able to answer questions like, how do people in the north of England or north of the UK respond to our stores, and how does that compare to those in London? How do older men respond to our stores? How do younger women respond to our stores? And what we were able to help them with, and what they were then able to act on, and it's really all about, you know, the client and the client's desire to make decisions based on data, was we identified that not everybody liked the iPad catalogs. And there was a bunch of people who were kind of teed off and annoyed with the fact that the paper catalog wasn't there. I, by the way, am one of those people because I grew up with catalogs, and so even though I'm sort of digital to the point that I'm merecasting practically anything, including my lunch today, I still need the physical catalog because I have 20 years of physically picking this thing up and looking at it. They identified that not everybody liked iPad catalogs, and they also identified that some customers in some cities really liked this low-touch, low human contact store. They liked the fact you came in, you touched a computer that was really nice, and you got your products. But there was a big class of users clustered in very specific geographies who didn't like the change and wanted more human contact. And the result was pretty significant because they'd made a huge investment, 700 stores, was to introduce catalogs in some stores. and to very quickly, without having to put out a survey that would have taken 6 weeks to set up and 4 weeks to execute and 4 weeks to get the results, they were able very quickly to identify the catalog gap and respond by making sure catalogs were available in the specific stores where people wanted more catalogs. They were also able to identify that in some stores, they needed to have more humans, just more human contact, more sales staff. And they made the investment in ensuring that those stores had the right number of people. And they were able to respond in some cases to very local store-level preferences relating to queuing or the presentation of the store or how many human touch points people wanted, all on the basis of social data. So if you cast your mind back to where social data was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, it was about retweet to win. It was about optimizing the time that you sent out a tweet to get more clicks. We've moved a very long way since then, because now people are starting to say, do I need to have 3 staff in this store or 12 staff in this store? And what is the evidence basis that tells me why I should have that 3 versus 12? It's a great example of social intelligence in a strategic context, which is a fundamental digital transformation. Another example is one that we worked on in Peer Index for a business that needed to shift to a younger audience. So this was a large UK business doing about 2 million in revenues annually. And their existing business was a physical presence in many of the high streets of the UK, thousands of stores. And they targeted men above the age of about 50. So their typical customer was a man over the age of 50 rolling in and sort of transacting in there. And they needed to move very quickly to a youth-oriented mobile-first customer set. So these are 20 to 30-year-old men who are carrying an Android phone or maybe an iOS device, who are going to transact purely online on the device and are not going to go into physical stores. Even if you refresh the stores, they're not going to go into physical stores. So the way we helped them was we said, let's just track an audience that matches very closely the target audience that you're moving your company to. And in their case, it was young men and women who love football, and really, really loved, cared about football, talked about football a great deal. And we tracked a real-time audience of 120,000 people who fell into that category. So this audience was an audience that was very different to their core, physical old men rolling into high street shops. This was a younger, digital-centric audience, passionate about the topic of football. In other words, the people they now want to sell to in the future. And what we were able to do by looking at this audience was identify things that they really wouldn't have thought to ask about. So we identified a TV show that heavily influenced their target audience. Now, it was a well-known TV show, but it wasn't one of our super blockbusters like The X Factor or Britain's Got Talent or The Voice. It was very much a tier 3 TV show. But we identified that the stars and celebrities on that show had a big influence on our clients' customers and future customers and their competitors' customers. And the second thing we were able to do was we alerted them that there was a specific music festival that was going to be launching in the UK 6 months later, which had a very strong affinity with their audience. They hadn't asked that question. They didn't ask the systems, which music festivals do our customers like? The system came up and said, I think you need to look at this. This particular item, it didn't know it was a music festival, it just knew it was called Creamfields, is trending very strongly amongst your target audience. And so the 2 outcomes that came from that were, number 1, the client sponsored and hired several of the stars of the TV show in question. And this woman with the purple hair, it's dyed, it's not her natural color, was hired to be a spokesperson for the brand. And the second thing they did was they created a lot of content around that specific music festival. But our client could have gone even further. Our client could have, in fact, said we've got a 6-month lead time on this event that matters to our customers. That gives us a significant advantage over our competitors, so we could now allocate sponsorship dollars to that event, and we can be the key presence there, because we know there's a high likelihood that lots of our would-be customers are going to be there and are going to have a strong affinity with it. So those are 3 examples of social intelligence and how they can be used to drive really significant offline marketing decisions. One of the ways we talk about this is saying, social has been used to make decisions on social, now it should be used to make decisions off social. And we're increasingly see companies do that. So I need to just have a little bit more water. And then let's just quickly check to see if there are any questions. We wouldn't want to disappoint our thousands of fans. Someone's asked me, what's my favorite cocktail at Soho House? Which is, my favorite cocktail will be a caipirinha, if they make them tonight. And someone's asked, should companies design their processes via social intelligence, or should the outcome of social intelligence design be customized for their process? I think where companies are today is that we've built processes that don't include social intelligence at their heart, so you need to just start by getting started, by demonstrating to the insights teams and demonstrating to the senior marketing leaders that we are getting insight out of these platforms. And you have to do that by asking the right questions. So you need to make a little bit of a commitment to say, I'm a bank and I'm willing to track people complaining about my bank on social and take action off it. And then once you've started to do that, I think then you get yourself into a position where you build it into the process. And what we would like to, where we think the market will get to, will be a market where we start to look at your real customers and your most profitable customers, and we help you identify them on social networks, and we help you identify your non-customers who look like your real customers. So this is something we were able to do at Peer Index. We were able to go to a client who said to us, here's an example of 10,000 super profitable customers. And we went off and we looked at those people on social and we built a predictive model that said, super profitable customers look like this. And we took that model and we ran it over our database of 300 million users and said, here are another 100,000 people who look very similar to your most profitable customers. And now you have an audience that you know is going to have a huge revenue pool for you in there, and those are the people you can go off and acquire. So those are the kind of things that you can start to do as you sort of step through the intelligence ladder. So just some conclusions and kind of where next. Social data is visceral. It's just anything that people put out there, and it can be almost anything. Monty, who's speaking next, was live streaming a bird that landed on the window by his breakfast this morning. I mean, it's visceral. It's just whatever happens. It's in your face. It's skewed. It's messy. It's real time. It's quite hard for people who are used to the disciplines of marketing insights to understand, but it is invaluable. And it becomes a strategic capability, but it does require a willingness to act on the insights that come out of it. And many companies in finance and in retail and FMCG do willingly act on insights, and you need that willingness to act. But there is an immediate payback if you're willing to take on the predictive and prescriptive analytics that can come out of social. But ultimately that choice, of course, rests with you. So I think I'm out of time now, but my Twitter handle there is @Azeem, and happy to take questions or meet up in person. I'll be around for about an hour or so before we go for cocktails. Thank you.